I turn on the switch. It's like, remember why you came here. And in that moment, like, I just remember myself, I'm an energy, and like the frequency had to align with bringing a certain vibration to the planet. And that was the job. Like, that's what I'm made for. That's my whole purpose. Like, a heart doesn't think, why am I beating? It just knows it's a heart and it beats. And so I connected with myself as that energy, as that part of source. And I plug into that knowing like that's what the function is. And I activate and then I live, you know? And so that's different than like, I'm in service to this or I'm showing up for this. It's just like, I am this. This is the job. This is the vibration. And so I just exist in that truth. So we've had a big year, business transitions in different ways, you and me. So I wanted to do this episode about biggest things I've learned in business this year, because we have a lot of business owners that listen to the show, and you have had a very different company than the business I run. So I think this will be really helpful for us to talk about some big lessons we learned, and maybe some overlaps, probably more on the energetic side, but also I know you certainly have some probably logistical things too. So I want to include both of those. Great. For both of us, and I think that's going to be really helpful. I love it. So I'm going to put it on you to start with. Yeah. What do you feel like was the biggest lesson you learned business-wise this year?
Wow. Biggest lesson I learned business-wise. I learned how to shut down a business. Yeah. Which is something that's not talked about.
Give context also, because
yes, thank you.
We haven't given context.
That's right. No context. So context is that just within the last 2 months, we've shut down Edge Theory Labs, which is the business I started 3 years ago with my cousin as my co-founder. And it was a wild experience, and wild ending particularly. I mean, we went from within 4 years, because there was some ideation involved first, but within 4 years we went from prototype to from an idea in our heads to a prototype to a working prototype to a better prototype to a first production run to pre-selling to a product to over $20 million in sales to closing down the business. And really within 2.5 years of selling, within 3 years we went from pre-launch to closure and 20 million in sales within 3 years, which is really uncommon.
It's wild.
Yeah, across the board.
I think a lot of people, and we don't need to get, we'll probably get into it a little more as we go, but like high level, especially people I think who don't run businesses like this, like literally they don't understand how that's possible. Yeah. Can you kind of high level explain how that happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
they're like, if they're making that much money, then how could they shut down?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Business, especially the kind of business we were running, which is it's a very high ticket equipment product, right? It's a hardware product. It costs a lot of money to make. You sell it for a lot of money. We're selling for $5,000, but that means it was costing us $2,500 to like landed COGS to actually produce and sell, which is expensive. So if you're doing 100 units, that's a $250,000 in just a 100 unit production run. You're doing 500 units. You're talking about $1 million, right? That you're putting into actually getting this thing out to sell. So it's a capital intensive business. There's different kinds of businesses. Is one of the things I learned a lot, is that there's all different types of businesses, and they all have pros and cons to them. There's no magic pill. Like if you're looking around, you're like, oh, this is the business because this one has these things. Like there's always going to be drawbacks to it. And I was coming from the coaching space and the high ticket coaching space as well, where I was more of the service side. And I was so excited to get a physical product because I was like, oh my God, amazing. Like I can send the product and then it's done. I don't have to deal with it. Yeah. Like there's no people that are like needy or questioning or want refunds or anything, right? It's like, oh cool, it's done with that. But there's a whole other suite of products that come with that. So for us, in terms of the context, and this is a whole other podcast we could do just on this one topic alone. So just
we probably should,
yeah. The spark notes of it is that when you have a capital intensive business, like, we were doing amazing. We had high sales, but we also had high cost to run the business. So we were profitable in the first year. It's all down profitability. You can generate a lot of top line revenue, but if it costs you a lot to run the business, I mean, most businesses are generating losses for years, if not decades, before they finally turn profitable, especially manufacturing businesses where you're standing up certain manufacturing capabilities or arms that take a lot of upfront investing to then get the payoff for. So we ran out of cash. Cash is king, and cash flow, especially in an early stage startup, is everything. And so ultimately what happened was we were we grew very fast. And when we grew very fast, we went from, you know, on a net revenue standpoint. So this is after there's, you know, your gross revenue and there's your net revenue. So after not just sales, but after sales, our net revenue standpoint, after you take out taxes and processing fees and sales commission, all that stuff, our net revenue standpoint, we went from 1.5 million our first year to 8.5 million our second year. And so that was a sharp jump.
Yeah.
And so if we're going from like 2 people doing 1.5 million to now you're doing 8.5 million and you're on a $10 million run rate, that is a materially different business. Yeah. It's a materially different business from the inventory you need to sell. It's a materially different business from the team that you need to operate it, the logistical headaches that you have to deal with. And so what happened was after we had that growth is we started scaling up and we got a little bit top heavy. And that's one of the big takeaways I had this year was stay lean as long as possible. So we started hiring more. We started bringing on more team, more infrastructure. And really we started putting a lot of Band-Aids on things that we needed to do surgery on. But because we were growing so quickly, it was easy for us to sweep some of the bigger things under the rug, like some of the product quality issues we're having, some of the vendors we were working with and the parts that we were getting. It was easy to be like, oh, well, we don't have time to deal with this because sales are like this and we got to keep on to the rocket ship. So like, we'll deal with that later and let's just keep going. There's a time for that too. But what happened was we had that jump so quickly that now all of a sudden, as sales start stagnating a little bit, market becomes saturated, and the offer that we had that was once so compelling because there was unlike anything like it on the market, that we were the first all-in-one integrated portable cold tub on the market that ever existed. We created that. And it was so compelling at the time from the price point and the offer that it was provided. Fast forward 2 years later, it's no longer, there's all these other ones and it's no longer, that offer is no longer relevant as it once was. And so saturation happened. Sales started slowing a little bit and stagnating and even decreasing now quarter over quarter, month over month. So we saw this like change in trajectory from growth to like stagnation and even decline. That coupled with some product issues that cost us a lot of money to fix, put us in a compromised cash position where now even, no matter how quickly we're able to cut our payroll, cut our overhead, reduce on budget cuts. We went through rounds of budget cuts, rounds of team, reducing our team and our headcount, very difficult things, very tough conversations to have within this past year. We couldn't do that fast enough to catch up with the bigger problem. So ultimately got to the point where you're like, oh, like we can't make these payments back. Like we have 200 grand in accounts payable. Like we can't make those, and paying our team was first and foremost above everything else. Like, okay, like we're down to the wire here, and going into our winter time, we don't see a material way out of this that we can't fundraise for, that we tried to, that we can't secure more lines of credit for, to where you're just like, we're legitimately out of cash now. Yeah. And so you run out of cash, and then you're forced to just close the business and liquidate the assets and pay back your creditors or your secured creditors or whoever you owe money to, and do that as best as possible. So that's the short of it.
Well, thanks for explaining that. Yes. What you said about building lean, I feel like that's the most common thing that I hear from particularly people who have already like built and usually sold a company and they start another one. Like I always hear people say, they're like, I just want to build this as lean as possible. Yes. And a lot of times they're like, and I didn't want to take any money this time. Like those are the two things that they change, which I think tells you a lot. But I mean, obviously there are advantages of going the other route that like, but it's all what you said. It's pros and cons, pros and cons. And I think, you don't know until you kind of figure it out. And I also feel like I don't know, how do you know if, like, okay, well, we need more manpower, more support. Like, we need to put money into this to grow, but then also more expenses, like more pressure, more liability. Like you're depending on your growth at that point. And if something happens, whether it's not always your own fault. I mean, like look at COVID and all the businesses people would never guess, so it's hard to know that balance.
It is. Something I always said too is like, scared money don't make no money. Like, take a shot. Like you got to take, and there's a time to do that for sure. And you have to do that. And you live and die by it. It's like choices you make and decisions you make. And I remember vividly when the norm for us became starting to sell, 100, 150 tubs a month. So bringing in $700,000-$800,000 a month in our net revenue, over $1 million a month in gross revenue. And we started to hit that kind of consistently. We started seeing the upward trends. Our profitability was like, okay, after we sell 90 tubs, we're breaking even and the rest is profitable, which is great because we can reinvest that into the business and to build more inventory. And so I remember starting to do those calculations of just like, okay, cool. Like I feel confident, like let's take those shots. Like let's reinvest on that That's only, but then slowly you start creeping up that overhead. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, our break even is 120 tubs.
Yeah.
And now sales are down from a peak of 180, 100 to 200 tubs a month. Now they're back down to like this mark over here. And instead of 800K, you're down to like 400, 500K a month. And now all of a sudden that becomes an issue. And now you're losing money. And that's a downward spiral that is, in certain businesses, is really, once you build infrastructure, is really difficult to operationally undo. Yeah. And you can only do so much of it. So that's the skinny of the context of what happened. And I was challenging for a lot of people, I think, on the outside to see, because there was this perception of we're doing so well and we're crushing it, we're killing it. And we had great top line too. And we were having such amazing partners and brand partnerships, and we were getting out there and we were building this community. And that I think you never know the health of a business until you actually look at the balance sheet.
Yeah.
You know?
True. Well, it's I think about like food products a lot. With like, a lot of people don't realize that most of their favorite products, like with this audience, especially like all these very like healthy food products, a lot of those companies are just, they're just draining cash. So they don't have any profitability, and it's like so hard to have a food product. You know, it's like so really hard. Low margins, like. It's crazy, and people freak out when they go off the shelves, and it's like, well, yeah, they've been just draining cash for years and years, or they freak out when people sell, and it's like, are you kidding? These people have been just operating in the red for 10 fucking years, and now you're pissed that they're gonna get their cash, like, you know. So I think it's good for people to see. I mean, I think a lot of people listening do know the behind the scenes of the business side, but a lot of people don't. Yeah. And I know before I started, like, you know, having friends who were doing a lot of this stuff and having clients, I mean, you don't understand. You don't really know. And I, you know, only have a limited understanding because I'm not in it with like your types of businesses. But there's a lot that people don't see, you know?
Yeah. So from your seat on the bus, you've had a big year in terms of,
Wait, we're on a yacht.
What?
We're on a yacht, not a bus.
We're on a yacht. Yes, thank you. From the super glam, super yacht.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The bedazzled.
From your bedazzled captain's seat of the yacht on the tower, on the captain's deck.
Oh, yes.
There we go. Now we're back on it. I feel like you've done a lot in your business this year. I mean, so much so that you even forgot that like you launched another book.
Yeah.
Right?
I was like, I forgot about that.
You forgot about that. And I think that's just part of the speed at which you iterate. And I've always been blown away just how quickly you're just like, oh yeah, like I just redid this course, or like and I know how much energy and time you put into that, but you move nimbly and you move quickly, to say the least. But you did a lot. You did a live event, your Oracle event, you did retreat, you did your book, you launched a new course. Like, how do you make of all those different things? And, we rebranded, you did a rebrand, you've hit your 700th podcast episode. Like, there's a lot that happened in this year.
We did 2 rebrands this year.
2 rebrands this year.
It's just super stupid.
Yeah, new website that's going to be launching.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Amazing. So what are some of the biggest lessons, or some of, I think it's a difficult question to ask, like, what are the biggest lessons versus like, what are some of the lessons that are present right now with you?
I mean, I have my list, so I'll keep referring back, but like top of mind, I mean, I definitely... And a lot of it's stuff I've learned before, but you just like learn again, like at a new level. One is just the same thing that you were saying, but just at a kind of a definitely different scale for me. But like, I mean, I dropped half the people that were working for me, so it's really tight now and it just works a lot better. And I had been adding more people on the team to try and take things off of me, and it actually just made it harder on me. And we were wasting so much time in communication that I was like, what are we doing? So and a lot of that, and this is connected to another thing, for me, I dropped a lot of my mentors, which we've talked about. I learned a lot around like who I was listening to. I think one of the big lessons for me was to trust myself over what other people were telling me. And I had a lot of like business mentors telling me like, you need to add more people. And I just felt like the more I was adding more people, in terms of who I was hiring, because I was just following that guidance, like it wasn't the right thing for me, and it was making it harder for me. So I kind of took a lot more things back on my plate that I had been trying to delegate for the last few years, and it actually made my workload a lot lighter, and it made communication much more streamlined. And I think, when you run a business like mine, you're always just, and I think with every company, but it's a little bit different when it's something more like, we need this specific position. Mine's a lot more creative, and it's not these like really clearly defined positions.
You need a specific people.
It's a people, and everyone's gonna play a lot of roles. So just like kind of really refining like what's really needed in the business. and who can play multiple roles. Like, again, taking more things back on my plate, which is interesting. Yeah. Like, a lot of things I had outsourced like years ago that I ended up taking back on my plate, and I get a lot more joy out of it, actually, and actually more time back, because I wasn't like reviewing things or changing things or editing things. I was just like letting myself be in my creative flow. Yep. So definitely like leaned out a lot. Like, yeah, it was like half the team, like more than half people that I was paying, you know, left, which, you know, that's not fun, but made communication a lot easier for sure. I feel like one of the things I learned, I don't know, this is so 3D, but like this year has been about upgrading my calendar, like upgrading my time management, upgrading my daily routines. Like, I'm obsessed with this. It's one of the main things, like in the program I'm running right now, like I've been teaching them, because I'm like, this is so core to getting all of this done. And I definitely kind of let things get loosey-goosey and too flowy, and I was so ungrounded. I wasn't getting things done. I didn't feel happy, whatever. And for me to be able to balance my personal life, I mean, I spent a lot more time like on my personal life than my business. Like, it's so, I think, it's a lot. When I think about my year, I'm like, it might seem like I was working a lot, but I was doing a lot more personal things. Yeah, but like, you're it's a very integrated. Yeah, it's a very parallel integrated path. It's integrated. So it's just not as clear. But for me, it's been a lot about like just getting clearer on my boundaries with people, travel, socially, and I had a lot of goals that I just really wanted to hit for myself that I didn't, because the first however many months of the year, I felt like I was dealing with so many personal things. It's true. And like, I mean, my move was like in 2 parts. I went through 2 big breakups. Yeah. I there were just like a lot of things going on in my personal life. I had some family stuff going on, that I felt like it took a lot of time, you know, and it needs to take that much time. Yeah. And so I think one of the things I learned about like kind of my calendar and how I schedule things is to account for the time I need personally, you know, and it was like to give myself a lot more room to get things done than I had before. Yeah. And that's good. I almost felt like, you know, people have this expectation of me. So then I create that expectation for myself of like, well, it should only take me 2 days to finish a book, because that's what it has been in the past. You're crazy. But it's the truth of the matter is, like with the books I want to write next, it's not going to take me 2 days. It's going to take me longer, because I want to write a different type of book. Yeah. And I want the room to do that. Yeah. But other people that are involved, they're like, well, we just need 3 days on the calendar. And I'm like, well, I don't want just 3 days. It's like, it just felt really constricting. So I feel like I've had to retrain a lot, like myself and people around me, of like, we need to give this more room, you know? And there's been a lot of communication around that, just calendar wise, and like everybody thinking things are going to take a lot less time than they are. Yeah. And it makes everybody ungrounded, everybody stressed. And it was just thing after thing after thing, you know? This happened with the book. This happened with the event. I mean, I learned so much from that event. Yeah. Like, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Right. And I think, you know, in my head, I was like, you know, how hard can it be? It's like, I mean, Catherine handled all of the logistics. You know, it's like, it was like outsourced, but everybody was grinding, and you don't realize all the little things that come up with that. Yeah. And then I start talking to my friends who throw events, and like, they're like, you got to give yourself like at least an 8-month runway. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck. You know, I'm like, wow, I, in my head, thought it was going to take me 2 to 3 months to get this together. And everybody else who I'm talking to is looking at me. They're like, that should be like a year-long thing. And so I had that real reality check of like, I can't just fly by the seat of my pants maybe as much anymore. Yeah. More of, we can pull through, but it was just so stressful. And I mean, we're still really young, but the reality is like, I'm not the same as I was. Like when I was like 25, you know, I could get away with lack of sleep and like just the way that I would hustle. Like I would hustle at times. I would just like binge, you know, and then like do nothing and then binge, and I could handle that. And my body can't take that. Like one night of bad sleep, I'm not okay, like at all. And I think because I was so young when I started all this, I could get by with that for like, in the context of, you know, the last like 12 years of my business or whatever. It's like for most of that, I was like, you know, much younger, and so my body could handle different things. So in my head, I'm like, well, I've always done it this way. it's very different than when you start a business when you're like a little bit older, like even if you start when you're 25.
Yeah.
You know, so I've just had to learn a lot about time management and expectation and like communicating expectations with people, because I think for me I like feel that projection, and I've had to like retrain people around me.
Yeah.
That I can't do that anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. And is that newer for you? Because I feel like you've always been on your calendar, but it's more like lengthening the runway, so to speak, giving yourself more time.
Yeah, but like I've always been on my calendar, but my calendar, like it was like 2 days, write a book.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Like, so I've had to like really change that.
Yeah.
I've had to change the way I relate. I've always been on my calendar, but it's just like the way I'm refining it, and even just like changing things with my daily routine and like optimizing this. It's just been like, it's been a core focus. Yeah. It wasn't as much of, it wasn't like difficult for me before. I just knew what to do. Yeah. And so it was a lot more refining.
Makes sense. Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I got from a mentor was lengthen the runway. And it was a saying I had forever. It's just lengthen the runway. If you think it's going to only take you 2 weeks, give yourself a month. It's something that I gave feedback to people I worked with all the time. I'm just like, how long do you think this will take? Okay, cool. It's like we all want it to go faster, but like, okay, let's buffer in another week there, because it's always useful. And when you give yourself more time to do something, what I find, it's almost the opposite. You think, oh, if I give myself 6 months to do it, like I'm going to push back that deadline. It's like you actually give yourself more space and more space to operate and to grow and to get things done faster. Yeah. So I've always felt that even with my business, like my runway was so lengthened, and maybe in a year from now it'll be a full-time job, like maybe, right? And we did $3 million in that first year. It's like I didn't think that was possible, because I gave myself time and there was no pressure on that, and then I could operate more efficiently. So it sounds like that's a big takeaway from your standpoint.
Yeah, totally. I think like I just my peace is more important to me than ever before. Like just in the pace of my life is like different than ever before. Like, and I still do like things kind of fast, but it's more flowy for me. Yeah. Like I'm just a different person, and before I liked it a lot crazier. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is there are always going to be things that pop up in business where it has to happen fast. Yeah. And so it's like anything that doesn't actually have a real pressure, like why would I put extra pressure? So we need to like double or triple the time we think it's going to take, and then if it's done earlier, great. Yeah. So since we've like implemented a lot of that, and just for me with myself and my life, like giving myself longer for projects, I mean, I just definitely feel way better. That was just like a big thing that I changed.
Good.
And that helped a lot.
That's good.
Yeah.
One of the other takeaways I had, and I'm curious to hear, because I'm sure it's probably similar. I'm curious to hear how you're going to relate to this from your side of the business, but is for me one of the biggest takeaways of, and also I had a quote unquote failure, right? Like I had a closing and a closure of the business where things didn't work and we were no longer able to continue. So I have a different lens of looking at this past year through that lens, which provides some finality and a different context of looking at it. But one of the things that I learned, and hindsight's always 20/20, right? And this is why it's important to do reflection. Whether your business doesn't have to go out of business to get the value of doing a postmortem every year and doing that reflection and being like taking the time doing the exercise like you did of what did I learn, what were my takeaways. But is you have to constantly be refining your offer and what you're offering. Yes. And what you're offering in the marketplace today is going to be different than what needs to be offered in a year from now. And we got comfortable with our offer because our offer was kick-ass. There was nothing like it on the market, and our offer was so strong. Same product, and yet you sell it for 2 years later, that offer is no longer strong because of the difference in the market, because of the difference in people's psychology and the difference of people's wants and needs. And I underestimated how quickly we needed to be constantly refining that offer and be predicting or coming up with like, well, what's the next offer that people are going to want, or what are the points that are going to resonate with people? And as much as we tried and as much as we worked on that, we ultimately couldn't do that quick enough. Yeah. And so I'm curious from your stand on the bus as well, like how has your offer evolved, or like how do you think about evolving your offer on more of the service side of the business?
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about this a lot because I feel like it's like two conflicting lessons, I guess. One has been, I mean, the real value in consistency and like momentum, because I err more on the side of changing things a lot than I do on consistency.
Yeah, you did 2 rebrands.
Yeah, so, and because if I don't like it, I got to get out of it because my energy is, and I think that's worked for me.
Yeah, that works for you.
And it works with a personal brand,
but
something that I've definitely come up against just in areas I'm like, I need to build momentum here. And I gotta build momentum, and like that's really important. You can't be like too flippy floppy,
right?
But at the same time, like you've gotta be ahead of the curve, and you can't just. It's not enough to have like a good idea. It's gotta be different. You gotta lean into what makes you different. And I think that's been like the real refining we've been reflecting on a lot is like what's the unique thing here that people can't get anywhere else, and
that's
like how are we staying ahead of it? Like what do people want now? And so for me,
That's great.
I was talking to Jackie about this, like, because we were talking about business. She was like, it's just sustainability. Like, she was saying with her in her business, I thought about what's sustainable, and the things I was doing were working really well, but they were not sustainable energetically for me. And so I thought about that for myself too, around, what's actually sustainable and what structure would allow me to continue to shift and change, So I think there's like a balance, like with sustainability, it's what's gonna be able to allow for momentum being built, but at the same time allow things to change so that you're not getting behind or people are still receiving that novelty, so like for me, I ended up getting rid of a lot of my pretty much all my like courses. This year we actually, now I'm thinking about this, I guess we did close all of my courses except Ahai, which Ahai was one of the more recent ones, but I'm redoing that for next year anyway. And I was like, I got to redo all of this. And I've been really cautious about how anything I want to create again, because I usually just pump out courses, but people outgrow it. And also people don't really want to buy courses as much anymore. So that changes. So I'm thinking about like, what can I be sustainable with, but also allows for things to change.
Right.
And like, how do people want to consume?
Yes.
So I think in-person experiences are big and important on both sides. And so again, it's looking at both consumer behavior, what people want, but also like what I'm excited to show up to. Like there's it's got to be both. It can't be just one or the other. In-person experiences, for me, I shut down my old membership. I mean, I've been running that membership for probably like 6 years. But I love that model because it's what I'm talking about. Like it allows for consistency, but it's like a slow build, right? So you can be consistent, but you can put anything you want in there really, and you kind of shift the energy. But we shut down the old one and opened a new one that's all just around like meditations and guided energy work. So it's like a tool database. Yeah. And that was the big shift for me, because I'm like, people like, what do people want now, and like what do I use, and like they just need to sit down, press play, and get their energy work done. And like that's what I can uniquely offer. Like I don't know anybody else who's doing an energy healing membership, you know what I mean? Like and it makes it so easy. And because I was just like, everybody who comes to see me for a session, like, how do I keep this up? And I'm like, well, I just want to send everybody there and just press play, and like you can do it at home, and it's really easy. So I just think thinking in that way has been important. That's great. But I still think there's a lot of cool codes to crack, which I think you'll be tapping into a little more too, like in the service space, because it is changing. But the thing is that people want individual support, and so I went back to one-on-one this year, and I had been getting that intuitively for a while, but like resisting it, and I went back to a lot of one-on-one, and like, I mean, I love it. But people, it's like you can get general advice everywhere. Right. There's an overabundance. People will pay whatever. And I'm the same. Yeah. Right. And you're the same. Of like, if you're going to sit down with me and just tell me in an hour everything I need to know for me in particular, I don't need to sort through all this noise. Like that's really what's valuable for people. So I think trying to find, and I'm still tinkering with this, because I think the real opportunity here, I've seen people do this really well with like human design and astrology. It's like, how you scale individualized advice. Right. And that's kind of what I'm playing with. Yeah. But I like
that. What I'm hearing is, and taking away too, is though the function remains the same, in my case it was like the product didn't change, but it's like the form that it takes, though the function of teaching people energy healing or giving people access to energy healing doesn't change. Like the form, you constantly have to be adapting and experimenting and iterating that form, because like though the content's the same in the course, the way that people are going to engage with the content today and engage with even like we were talking about offline, like the medium of podcasts and how that's changing. Like you have to constantly be thinking and experimenting and kind of touching up against the boundaries and trying things and failing on things and being like, oh, we tried that didn't work. Like, okay, cool. Well, now it leads us towards this. So the form, you've got to constantly be iterating the form. And it's an experimentation. And that experimentation mindset, I think, is really helpful within the business lens of like, experiment with it. Throw the shit at the wall, see what sticks.
And that's where it's interesting with social media, because I think a big thing everybody knows with social media, who owns a business, is you've got to be dynamic, right? And like people who jumped on TikTok early on and really hit it hard, like did really well. For a lot of people, that really blew up their business, right? But then there's all these platforms, then you can get really lost in like trying to do too much and it's not doing anything at all. So I think there's always going to be new things opening up, and you just got to kind of know, is this worth my time and energy, you know? And that was the other big thing for me with just like platforms of like, there's lots of options. What allows me to stay in flow? Like, what is best for the type of content I want to bring forward and how I want to share, versus like trying to be everywhere and adjust to the platform, you know? So it was, and again, this is a conversation I had with Jackie. It was like, instead of like, how can I show up and make this platform, like, how can I work in alignment with this platform? It's like, how can this platform work for me? And that was a very different way to kind of look at it. And like you realize, you know, there's just certain things that don't lend themselves well on certain platforms. Like, I always felt when I was doing a lot more like trance channeling, like that doesn't do well. That's not short form. Like, that's not TikTok video. That's not,
is it not
a real
LinkedIn post?
Like, I mean, that's another conversation. But you know what I mean? Like, you just got to know like what's actually in alignment with what you're offering, and that might change over time. But I think more than anything, the thing, and I just feel like I feel like this year I was just coming back to a lot of my roots. Like, one of the big things I learned was everything that I used to do in my business before I learned about business was just better. Like, and I wish I could I've kind of had to unlearn all these things I learned from different mentors and coaches and courses. Like, I mean, to be honest, you know, I did, because I just was so plugged into just like the voice of this, the frequency of this, like, matters the most. And when that guided me, everything was so much clearer. And then when I started putting my logical brain in there and like what other people were telling me was best and what followed, like, you know, trends and whatever, it never worked for me. And it's like, why would it? Nothing in my life has made any fucking sense, you know? So like, we just really come back to like what's our voice? What are we sharing? Like, doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. And I think that goes in alignment with being ahead of the curve, because you naturally are just forward thinking, because it's like, what's the most me? You know, I was talking to a friend about this a couple days ago, who I think, like a lot of people, has just felt like, I don't know what platform I really want to lean into. It's just like kind of getting caught in the clutter, because it's so much to handle, especially for people like who are doing more like me, where it's, you know, you. And I just told her, I sent her links to some people, and I was like, I want you to look at these people. I'm like, these people, they don't post regularly. They don't show their face. They, you know, look at their community that they built. They're just on Discord. They don't have like these people that are just doing things in the way they want to. And they have, you know, communities of like 10,000 people who are all paying, you know, $20 a month, and they've built it in a totally non-conventional way. And I'm like, if you hate doing it one way, just stop doing it that way, you know? So I think there's a balance between getting out of your comfort zone, but also just knowing like what's gonna vibe best for what you're sharing and your energy, and like leaning into your strengths.
I agree. I like that a lot.
It's the most important thing.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Well, I wanted to ask you, like, because you've been in the coaching space and like that side of things, and then also having a product.
Yeah.
And like, what are your thoughts now, kind of after both of those?
Well, I'm excited to get back into the coaching space.
You are.
Yeah. And I, in the same way, and of thinking about how now I'm coming back after 4 years, and I kind of like accidentally built my coaching business. Like, I was working for a coaching company. I was working for a coach that I was employee number 1 at his business.
Really?
Yeah, Xander Fryer. He started High Impact Coaching. That's how Ty Nelly and I met, actually. Ty Nelly was doing some video for Xander, and I came over for a content day and was doing some video. So Xander was one of the early, this is probably 9 years ago now, when he started his business. And So he was like early on from the business coaching side, right? Now there's a dime a dozen business coaches. Everybody wants to help coaches, coach coaches and make money, right? Everybody wants to do that. And so he was one of the first ones and very legit at that. I mean, he's helped thousands of people.
Yeah.
And so I came on right after he was really growing as his first employee, and I was doing sales for him. I was selling, you know, 6K to 9K coaching packages over the phone, cutting my teeth doing phone sales, high ticket, hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long consultation calls, you know, helping people work through their stuff to get, and that taught me a lot. And then I was director of operations, and I ended up being full-time director of operations and phasing out of sales after 3-4 years in sales. I was with him for over 5 years and built a lot of foundation. So I learned a lot about the coaching space and how to run a coaching business from just him and being his right-hand man, and then working with our clients as one of their coaches too. Just doing a lot of mindset coaching stuff. But that was just my quote unquote day job, which I loved and I was all into. And then on the side, I got deeper into health and wellness. That's when I started doing these adventures and retreats, and I did my first Wim Hof method retreat. And that's where I started getting this deeper passion for like working with people more on that side of things. I became a Wim Hof method instructor, and that really started to scratch this itch of like, oh, this stuff feels like juicy to me. And as I was doing that as well, just by virtue of like people that introduced other people to me, or people that reached out to me like, hey, can you help me? Or like, hey, I feel like I feel like you might be able to help me. I brought on a couple coaching clients that were that was just totally like, it started with one who then referred me to another, who then referred me to another, and then pretty soon like I've got a 10K a month coaching business like on the side of my full-time job. And like I was not looking for that. I wasn't posting for that. I was posting myself, and I was being authentic, but then I had a chance to work with someone, and I was delivering, and then they gave me a chance to work with someone else, and I delivered. And so I've kind of found my rhythm in that way. And that allowed me to save up what I needed to make the initial investments into Edge to get Edge off the ground. And so I'm now coming back to this space with a whole different lens, a whole different mindset of like, what do I want to do? What do I like doing? And thinking about it differently too. In person, we started doing these in-person events through Edge, Sunrise Social Club, and doing events in person, which I love and brought me so much energy. So, and retreats and experiences. So there's all these things that I'm kind of like circling now and in the process in real time of like sitting with and being like, cool, like what do I want to offer? Like, how do I want to package this? Like, what do I want to focus on? Which is exciting and blank canvas. But the biggest difference is, I mean, it's so funny because as I got the physical product, I was like I said earlier, thank God, like, oh, you ship it and it's done. Someone pays up front on a credit card and that's it. Like no payment plans, like no chargebacks, like no people freaking out, or no people like losing money or coming back or flipping out or changing personality. Like, you know, it happens when you're in the coaching space. You touch a lot of people, and there's some dream clients, and then there's some clients that make you question what you're doing, right? And it's all part of the process. But I was like, oh, product amazing. But then the type of product that we released was also ended up being a high touch hardware product. So I like product. I think product is scalable. Product is really scalable, can be very scalable with the right type of product. It's more capital intensive. Like you can start up, if you have something valuable to help someone with, like you can start up for no overhead besides your time and a website or a Zoom membership. Like that's the allure, and that's the low barrier to entry there, which also means that there's a lot of noise and a lot of people that may not be qualified to be helping other people in the space. That happens. But now after building up high overhead, $1 million payroll on our team, and an expensive product that cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars for one production run to build the product, I'm like, oh, like, thank God I can come back to something that's lean and I can be myself, and like, you know, some softwares and maybe one person or some content, and it can be way lower overhead and higher margin, which is great. But that's also, it's more difficult. It can be more difficult to sell those. You have to stand apart. You have to really deliver. You have to find the ways that uniquely allow yourself to shine, and you have to be consistent with it. It takes a lot of reps. It takes a lot of putting yourself out there, a lot of, you know, posting on social media. It takes a lot of that stuff to generate and build a community. And so it's pros and cons. Like I feel excited to come back to the leanness of that as well, and have time to explore. And that's the way I'm thinking about it too, though, is just like how's the form evolving, and what do people need, and what do people want, and how can I meet them there?
What do you think people need, and what do you think they want? Like, what do you feel like?
I think people, like you said earlier, people want in real life experiences and events. And I think people are craving community. People are craving consistency, and they're craving a community that they can feel connected to at the end of the day. I do think that, like you said, people are willing to pay for that one-on-one stuff at the end of the day. That's just a fact. And that's where you can deliver the most impact and the most value. But I the way that I'm kind of thinking about it is, how do you create a multi-tiered system of being able to meet people where they're at?
For sure.
Whether that's a combination of events, group coaching, and then one-on-one coaching. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Early on in the stage is like, how can I provide something that can bring people in to kind of feel the magic of the container that's created, and then give them a logical next step that's a no-brainer. Like, how can you give someone that no-brainer offer, right? That's just like, this is a no-brainer, and for what I'm getting, absolutely. And then always have the next level there, and have that work up to being that high ticket, one-on-one deep work where you can really drive transformation for those few people that are, that are ready to invest in that's accessible, they're willing to make that happen, and that you can be selective with that as well. So that's kind of the way I think about it in terms of foundation from a business standpoint. But I think people want to hug people. People want to get in person and hug someone. They want to feel it's the IRL. They want to feel in real life. You want to feel the magic and the palpability of being in a room, even in a container like this. It's a very different experience in having this conversation here than it is over Zoom. But people want to feel that connection.
I mean, that was one of the things I wrote down. It was just like, in person is really important for me. Like we were talking about the podcast. Like I was like, I need to come back to in person. And I also realized that, because they go hand in hand for me, like, I really need to prioritize my creativity and everything I was doing. And a lot of things I was doing in my business last year started to feel just like, this is the to do. Like, I was just showing up to it and just responding to it, but it wasn't feeling like creative. It was just like already there. A system was already there. And so having that creative energy, and I think that comes in with like in-person experiences. Like, it's an experience. That's why the event was so fun. We're like, how do we want people to feel? Like, what's the vibe? Like, what are the activations? Like, we're putting glitter on their food. Like, all of that stuff is creative, and you're creating that experience. And it's just like, nothing virtual can match that. So the feeling in the room, the feeling of hugging people. It's just completely different. And I think depending on the thing, like obviously the ideal is like local events,
right.
I think a lot of people live in places where no one's throwing those local events. Like we're biased different. Like, we're in California, it's different.
Especially in San Diego and LA area. Like
it's a lot easier to kind of put something together or to find something that's going on and to have that. But I think in a lot of other areas it's not as active, and so it can feel difficult for people. But you just, and then they bump up against like not a good time, or I don't want to pay, but it's like, I don't know, what do you really need though? Kind of like, I know Disneyland's expensive for people, but there's just nothing. There's nothing like the Disney magic.
There's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it.
Add a zero to the ROI.
Exactly. That's so for people, we're going to Disneyland. I told Josh that when we invest $250 into our day, the ROI is going to be $250K.
No doubt. Yeah, I love it.
All of the joy and the high vibrations.
I believe it.
We're going to have some of the most important downloads of our life.
I believe it. I'm here for it.
Yeah. 100%. I'm so excited for it. So, but I think that in-person thing, like for me, just personally, was really important. I mean, you also, with Edge, like you're around people a lot. Like I'm really by myself. And a lot of my interaction all the time is it's virtual. Like I'm talking to people all day. But not in person. And it creates this really weird feeling for me because half of me is like, I don't want to talk to another fucking person.
Right.
Because I'm exhausted. Like I've been talking all day. I've been interacting with people all day. But because it wasn't in real life, my body didn't actually feel any like connection. So it also feel lonely. So it's this really weird thing that I can't do anymore. I need more of a balance. So I need more in-person stuff. So it makes a big difference.
I agree.
And I think a lot of people are doing like everything just virtual. A lot of people, even all their friendships are also virtual. And so it does do something really weird to the brain and the body because it's a mismatch.
I think too, from a business owner standpoint, I'm connecting something to what we were talking about earlier, which is like when you started your podcast at 19, very few people had a podcast. The barrier to entry to start a podcast was super high back then. It wasn't as easy as like, you post on one platform and you're doing the RSS feeds and you're uploading.
Oh my God, it was 800 steps.
800
to
steps
post one episode.
And the equipment, it's like it was not as accessible. The same way that starting a coaching business 8 years ago was not as accessible as it is now. And so I think that I'm always intrigued to be like, how can you push the boundaries and play in an area where you can stand apart? And that means that there's a higher barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And so like, how can you take those shots or experiment with those things? I think right now live events and in-person events is that thing. Like
totally.
It's not easy right now.
Yeah.
To put on an in-person event and get people to show up to something, even if you're doing something for free, to like get people to show up to something is not an easy thing.
That's what's weird to me though, because I agree with you. People want in person, but it is really hard to get people to show up. And I'm like, what is that? Like literally, what is that? It makes no sense.
I think it's it's a great point. I think it's part of the flakiness that we've developed as a society and as a culture, and some of that like comfort of like, oh, it was an idea then, and then, and like it sounded good then, but now I'm tired. And like and people bail, and it just happens. It's a part of it, and that's why I also find too that's why charging for events increases your attendance rate 100%. Like when we were doing our free Sunrise Social Club, free yoga, breath work, cold immersion that I was leading, when we were doing it for free, it was about and this was pretty high for events. For a free event, we were seeing about a 50% show rate, which is like pretty high for a free event.
Yeah, it is.
Usually you're looking at 20 to 40, 50% on the high end of a show rate for a free event. But when you start charging, you're going to get a lower number of RSVPs and people that are purchasing tickets, but you're going to get a much higher. That number is going to jack up to 80% people that show up, to 90%, depending on what the payment rate is or what the value exchange is. You're going to get, you charge $1,000 ticket for something, you're going to get a 99% show rate to the event. So that energetic commitment, I think, is an important piece, even if it's nominal. Like even we were charging a $15, $18 ticket fee for something that, was a 3-hour long workshop, free product and, all those things. And even just that energetic commitment. But what I would always say, and I always, even for paid events, I always, specifically free events, but even for paid events, I always start off the event by being like, shout out to you for showing up, because at one point you signed up for this and you decided this will be good for me. I want to do this, but you also followed through. And showing up is half the battle. It's more than half the battle. You showed up, and there was a million excuses that you could have come up with today to not go. Oh, I'm feeling a little run down. Oh, I got a big week ahead. Oh, I'm a little tired. Or, oh, I was out later last night than I expected. Or, oh, I forgot this football game was going to be on and I wanted to watch this football game. Like there's always things, but the fact that like you showed up and you voted with your time and your presence and your energy, it's amazing. So trust that there's something here for you.
Yeah.
And trust that there's something that you're going to receive from this, because I know you will. So I think people need that reminder too, and you do that once, and then you tap into it and into the energy of the community or whatever you're getting out of one of your events, and then you feel that, and then you come back, and you want to come back, you want to bring friends. And if you can do that and you can create an experience where people walk away wanting to come back and wanting to bring other people, then you're onto something.
Yeah, I totally agree of like, celebrate yourself for showing up, and at the same time, because I'm just like, do more. Like I'm just like, what does it say about people that it's so hard for them to show up?
Yeah.
Like that's my issue, and that's the thing that I want people to understand about creating the things that they want in their life. Like I don't care if I have the fucking sniffles, I'm showing up. Like that's just the way I live my life, and you're the same way.
Yeah, totally.
And all the flaky people, right? I'm like, this is why you can't make money. This is why you're struggling. This is why you can't be in a real relationship. It's like if you're struggling to show up to something, like that's an energetic in your life.
Yes.
Like you've got to be someone who shows up.
Yes. Yep.
And that's from the manifestation perspective. Like we're co-creating.
Yes.
If you're not showing up, then the universe is not going to show up for you. It's that simple.
It's that simple.
So it's like, yes, I want to celebrate you, and at the same time I want to be like, buck the fuck up and start showing up everywhere.
Right.
Like it's very easy for me to get up and like, I don't have a start time every day. I don't have I don't have someone holding me accountable. Like I'm not going to get slapped on my wrist, right? It's like you show up for your day, you show up for people, like you go to events, and I think that comes up in all areas. That comes up in business, with money, it comes up with the friendships, like the number of people that just like don't show up, and they don't value that.
So true.
It's a huge problem.
It is. I love what you said too. I just listened to Abraham Hicks this morning. That was on my YouTube algorithm. Shout out to YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
YouTube is just dialed. It just knows me so well. So I get every morning. There's my 5-minute Abraham Hicks clip. It's right there at the top. It's the new one. It's always right for me.
Yeah.
And then it goes right after the next auto plays right into my binaural beats music for like journaling. So I was just like, great. And so something new, or multi Martin on the hand pan. It's like, great. You got me dialed.
Love it.
And what Abraham Hicks said this morning that I wrote down and sent to a friend with the link, like I often do, was you are the last cooperative component that needs to show up for all of your things to come true, for all your manifestations to come true. All the other cooperative components are there ready for you. It's like you are the last thing that needs to show up to the party. So you got to show up.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's really the missing link, and people are wondering why they can't create what they want. It's like, well, you're not showing up.
Yep.
So not everything's just going to be delivered to you without you trying.
Agree. I want to double tap on what you said there too around showing up. Like, you don't have a start time, and there's this common phrase, especially I found this in the coaching or personal brand or personal business standpoint, which is like, oh, I'm gonna be my own boss. And a reframe that I heard that I really love and that I really have worked to embody is, you should not try to be your own boss, but be your own employee. And it's a very different energy in how you're showing up. Like, how can I show up to be as if I want to be, how can I show up to be the best employee that I want to have? Different energy. It's like, you're going to show up on time, you're going to put in the work, but it's a whole different energy. So I'm curious on your perspective on one of the other takeaways you might have, but what are some of the other takeaways you've learned or your process this year around showing up for yourself, or showing up for your business, or showing up for other people, or for your team?
Yeah. I love the way that you said that. The way that I think about it, it's like, we're in service to the mission, you know? So it's like, instead of being my own employee, it's like, I am serving the mission. Like, the mission is the boss, you know? And so I think that you've always got to be really, really clear on your why and what the actual mission is. And the specifics of that might upgrade, you know? And so I have a sheet where I have like my mission energetically, and the specifics of that, like, we're reaching this many people and teaching them this, or helping them feel this. It's like macro and then a little more micro, so I have something a little more tangible to work with. And then I have all the like kind of values and mission statement that comes with that. And this year, you know, I looked at that and I was like, wow, this needs to be upgraded. Like, a lot of the things that I felt like were important for me to bring forward in my business, like, now it's a little bit different, different flavor, and that should get consistently updated. Like, themes are changing, what people are going through is changing. So refining that and like looking back on that, and everything has to get filtered through that, so I'm not getting distracted, you know. But for me, I'm not, you know, the topic of motivation is interesting. I'm actually not really like motivated. Like, I mean, what motivates me is accountability, but my accountability is divine.
Put that on mug or t-shirt.
You know, that's the thing. It's like, I can't, like, when God gives you a mission, that's the fucking mission. Like, so yeah, we have choice, but I don't have a choice. Jesus had a choice, but Jesus didn't have a choice. Yeah,
you made the choice a long time ago.
You know, and so from one perspective you can choose, but when you are when you have decided you are living in your highest alignment as your soul self, as an extension of God, of source, like, there's not a real choice. It's like, I'm either living at this level of potential or like I fail, and failure is not an option. It's not an option. And, you know, we did this podcast earlier this year where basically the theme was, what do you do if running away isn't on the table? And a lot of people put that on the table. Like, failing is an option. What if I fail? Maybe I should run away. Maybe I should avoid, whether it's in business or personal relationships. And it's like, that's literally not on my table. And I was saying this to somebody yesterday. We were like working on her manifestation thing. And I said, keep talking about this. Like, what if it doesn't happen? We're manifesting. It is happening. It not happening isn't on the table. That's not on the table. So when people are talking about, you know, I want to make this much money, or I want to meet my person, if there's a piece of that that's talking like, what if I don't meet my person? You're not manifesting. You're manifesting when you say, like I said, you know, God, I'm meeting my husband. There's not a piece of me that's like, what if he doesn't come? It's like, I'm meeting him. That's it. And so you've got to take all these other things off the table. It's not an option. Not showing up isn't an option. And that changes the way you move through the world, you know? So for me, like, what do people need? How do I want to show up? Like, what is it that and my friend asked it to me in an important way, actually recently. She's like, what do you like a mama bear about? Like, because I think you've got to always tap into that, like for me, like that spice, that fire, like what brings it out of me, like what gets me fucking going.
Right.
And it's been different for me at different points of my life, you know? And so I always got to connect in with that of like, what's going to get me in that energy? Because that's going to move me. Like it's not an option for me to let someone, you know, treat my friends that way. Like it's not even on my mind that I wouldn't get in the way if somebody was trying to hurt my friend. And so I thought about that, and that had changed. And so that becomes the focus of what I want to share and express in the world, you know? So it's, you know, people will say things like, you know, I'm in service to this, and that's one way to put it, but it's not even that feeling. It's just like, this is what has to get done. And so it's getting done. Yeah. And I always, you know, for me in my meditation, and this is a big thing for me that I learned on a very logical level, like having really clear masculine time and really clear feminine time in my business and in my consciousness. That's one of the things that like the oracle work really taught me, because like for me to drop in that deep, my whole logical side has to be dead. I can't drop in that deep. Like, and when I'm in that stage, I just can't do any logical thinking. Yeah. And like vice versa. Like the more I'm really dialed in when I'm like practical and logical, like my oracle part it's a lot quieter, you know? And so it's actually helpful for me to like really toggle that on and off, you know? But when I get into my spirit mode and I'm just like, okay, I turn on the switch that's like, remember why you came here. And in that moment, like I just remember myself, I'm an energy, and like the frequency had to align with bringing a certain vibration to the planet, and that was the job. Like that's what I'm made for. That's my whole purpose. Like a heart doesn't think, why am I beating? It just knows it's a heart and it beats. And so I connect with myself as that energy, as that part of source, and I plug into that knowing like that's what the function is, and I activate and then I live, you know? And so that's different than like I'm in service to this or I'm showing up for this. It's just like I am this. This is the job. This is the vibration. And so I just exist in that truth.
Yeah, that's so good. That's really good. You know? And I think that's also why it's so important to find how you can align with that too within business. That's a big takeaway I had too, is like, if I didn't really care about this, I would have hung up the cleats a long time ago. You know, I would have been done in the 4th inning, right? When you get some adversity that hits. So, but that makes it's not an option. It's not negotiable. Like you're just doing it because this is what you're pulled to do. You don't need to motivate yourself to do it. You're inspired. Like you're pulled to do it. And that's going to blast through any blocks that you have.
Well, and that's part of why identity is so tied to that, right? Like when we identify something, we're not motivated to do it. We just do it. Like what I was saying with podcasting, like it's part of my identity. It's just like I don't think about it. It's not about motivation or not. It's just like I do it. It's on my calendar. If I'm someone who's healthy and I eat well, like if I identify that way, I just do. And so when we talk about like if you can shift your identity and you're somebody who just shows the fuck up all the time, you don't have to motivate yourself. You just show the fuck up. That's who you are. Right. And so that identity shift, I think, is really important. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. That's how we behaviorally make the most sustainable change, is identity-based behavior.
Yeah, totally. I want to look at I think we covered most of it, but
we covered some good topics
I'll read this.
Let's see what else.
Optimizing calendar, time management, doing less things in a day. That was big for me. Be more discerning about who I'm listening to. Honor what's resonant for me instead of what other people are asking for.
Ooh,
that was a big one, because you know there's a lot of like, what are people asking for from you to help guide you, which can be helpful because it helps you pay attention to what the universe is sending your way, and like living in response generators. That's not bad advice, but I mean anything could be good or bad advice contextually. And for me, the thing is, especially in what we do, like I am here not to make people comfortable. Like I am here to help people pull into a higher caliber. And so typically what they're asking for is not what they need.
Yep.
And so me just answering what people wanted was keeping them in their comfort, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So that was the big thing.
That's big
for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
you take it as a data point. You have to chart your own course.
Yeah. I also put getting comfortable with the inventor's dilemma, which Sam and I talked a bit about, like just I was just getting really frustrated about conceptual things or growth related things business wise that I wasn't like figuring out. I just felt like really frustrated. And she told me, she said, like, you're relating to it like, why haven't I figured this out? I should know this, because you're thinking it's like things that you've done before. And she said, what, like, when you're an inventor, you know, when you are in a new landscape, this just comes to the territory. And I think just like that simple reframe, like, this just comes to the territory. Like, I'm gonna feel like, as long as I feel like this, I actually know I'm in the right space because I'm trying to build something new,
right,
is really important versus trying to apply old things that worked, or like things that worked for other people to what I did. And that was like a really important reframe for me.
That's a great reframe.
Yeah.
Solid. What else?
In-person connections we talked about. Things taking longer than we think. Building in time for rest and recovery. For me, and with that I'll just add like building in personal time, but like building in personal integration time, because like I'm channeling a lot of stuff that then I need to go back and listen for myself and like integrate. And I went through a period where I was just channeling so much, it was like breaking my own brain, but I just kept channeling and I wasn't integrating it for myself, that then I had this huge hangover and like couldn't function. Does that make sense? Like, so yeah. I had to realize that. And I think my big thing, and this is in business and life, but my last one that I wrote was just knowing my priorities. Like, and I think it's one thing to like know them, but it's another to have them written out and look at them every day. And when I started doing that, of like, what is my priority right now? That gave me a lot of peace, because sometimes my priority wasn't business, sometimes it was personal. And like when I have it on a piece of paper, like, hey, this is actually what's important to me in this moment, it just helped me shift my energy and like know how I wanted to spend my time, help me tune into like what I really needed, and like give myself grace. That's great. Know, so I had different, you know, we might think we have certain goals, but then life happens and you're like, well, right now the priority is actually this, and like that's okay. So for me, making a lot of this, like just like writing it down, looking at it every day, like these are my priorities right now. Do these need to be updated? Have they changed? And then aligning everything on my calendar, everything in my personal life with that priority. Like, you know, one of the things, you know, I kind of went through was like a friend clean out a bit. And that was a lot like, hey, what's my priority in my business? And like at the frequency I need to be in to create that in my life, like the people I'm around are important, you know, and I've got to kind of clean that up, you know? So that was a big thing with like priorities as well. And it puts everything in perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I like that idea of like just having written down what are your priorities, so you have it front and center.
Yeah.
Because that informs everything else.
Yeah. And it requires you to claim it, right? Yeah. When I wrote it down, I'm like, oh, like it's my priority to build this or to do this. Yeah. Or even like to rest, to like do some more personal things, to have better work-life balance. Like, and you look at that and you're like, okay, well then I need to make choices this week that align with those priorities.
And it's really good to do an audit of what your current priorities are by just looking at how you're spending your time, because action expresses priority.
Yeah.
So whatever we're spending our time doing is the priority by default. We all want to do other things. We all want to write a book, but like if it's a priority, you'll do it.
Yeah. You'll do it. You'll do it. Any final thoughts?
Love it. This shit ain't not for the weak of heart, weak of stomach, or faint of heart. I'll tell you that much. Entrepreneurship, like, it ain't easy. And I think that there's some rose-colored glasses. And I think that nobody's doing as well as you think they are too.
Yeah.
You know,
for
like
sure.
There's no magic potion. There's no silver bullet. There's no one way to just do it and to be like, oh, and be very cautious of the people and the unicorns out there too that are like, just because someone did it doesn't mean that it's easy to replicate it and do it again. And be cautious of people out there that are claiming or showing you just how well they're doing and everything, because if that's not also coming with the challenges, then there's something fishy, something's up.
What do you think that, like, in building Edge, that built the most within you?
That built the most within me? I would say that, I mean, there's a couple things. My capacity for just being a man has grown in such a strong way from being a leader. And that's come by virtue of one of the things I was reflecting on is that I got very good at and strengthened the muscle of having very difficult conversations, which is a great skill to have in life. I think. The way that I'm able to have a difficult conversation now is infinitely different and better than it was even 6 months ago, really, a year ago, for sure, for certain. And at this time last year, for sure. You know, I was probably working my way up to one tough conversation of like letting an employee go, or having to have a difficult conversation with an investor or a partner or something like that. But I just, by virtue of just having those reps that I've been forced to like step in and to have those difficult conversations, gotten good at them. And by getting good at them, I mean like being able to show up with integrity, honesty, transparency, and sincerity. And if you do that when you're showing up to difficult conversation, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be received in a good way. And even if the person might not agree with it or might not like it, but that built up a lot within me of being able to have those difficult conversations, I would say. And then the other thing that built the most within me is experimenting with these events that I have the vision of just like, cool, coming back from a trip I was on. I'm like, I'm feeling this pull to do some more in-person stuff. Like, let's do an event in the back of our parking lot and open it up and fire up the sauna and the cold tubs and like invite whoever wants to come to do an ice bath and I'll lead some breath work. And we did the first one. We had like 15 people showed up. Amazing. Let's do it again. And let's do a yoga class in the beginning this time. And then I'll do breath work. And it's like, great. And we had 30 people showed up, then 50, then 100, then 150, then 200. And it's like, oh, holy crap, that's wild how that works. Like time after time. And that built up a lot of momentum and a lot of energy within me, and also a lot of passion. And uncovered a lot of passion that for myself for creating those spaces and containers and creating a container for transformation for people and holding that space through the breath work, through the cold immersion, through the messages that we're sharing, through the interactions and the activities that we're getting people to go do with each other and just to break people out of their mold. So that built up a lot within me and my capacity for leading, both in having difficult conversations and in leading and facilitating as a group. And the capacity for this past year has increased my capacity to just hold the fullness of it, the fullness of life, and when things don't go your way, and learning how you can discern between what's controllable, what's not controllable. How can I focus on controlling the controllables here and leave the rest, like focus on putting the effort where the effort belongs, as Abraham Hicks says, and focus on what my job is and delegate the rest. And that discernment of staying and doubling down on those controllables.
What about what you learned about like how to know when to push harder versus let go?
I learned what was mine to push harder on and what to let go on. I learned how to discern between those two things. Like, what?
How do you discern that?
What's directly within your control? What can you control? It's that simple. It's like, can your effort on this matter make a difference? Can it move the ball forward? Can it knock a domino note down? If the answer is yes, then great, push hard. If the answer is no, then let go. You're going to push it. You're pushing up against a brick wall. You're trying to swim upstream. It's not going to work. So I can give you tons of examples around that, but like I can only control as much. You can only control what you can control, which is what inputs. What are the inputs you're putting in? How are you showing up? That you can control. You have 100% control over that. And so I kept simplifying that, and Chad and I would constantly do this every day. Is just like control the controllables. Like, what's within our control today? Like, we can't control how many people choose to purchase our product today, but we can control how many people we reach out to. We can control how we're showing up. We can control how we're getting on the phone call with someone that's interested in buying a tub. Like, that's all within our control. So we had themes, and for the month, we're just like, let's measure this month's success not by on the outcome. Like, let's forget about the revenue number this month. And let's just focus on our inputs. Let's focus on showing up. Let's focus on how many calls we're getting on. Let's focus on how many partnerships we're opening up, or how many cross-selling promotionals we're doing, or how many emails we're hitting our newsletter. And then all of a sudden you take back control of what's in your control, and you surrender, and you surrender the rest to God to do the rest. And that's all you can do. And when you're in that situation and you surrender what's out of your control, then it starts to flow in your favor, even if your favor may not be what you want it to be. It's like the other thing I said all the time was, God, please lead me to where I'm needed most. I trust you to lead me where I'm needed most. As long as that's within edge, then I trust you and I'm here. And if that's out of edge, then great, I trust you and I'll follow you there too, as painful as that might be. So that I surrendered to like a long time ago. And when I surrendered to that, it brought me a lot of peace to be able to then clarity and headspace to be able to operate within the controllables. So it's just, I think it's that simple. Just like, ask yourself right now, like, what's in my control truly? Because the outcome that you want is typically not in your control. The inputs to get there, some of those inputs are, but it's a cooperative component. It's dance. It's an art.
Yeah. Well, and I think also like you're very good at non-attachment.
Yeah.
I think because of that spiritual connection though.
Yes.
Like I think it's because you believe like you're going to be guided where you need to go.
Yes.
Like
yes. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing that is important for us to include in this in different ways. Well, I think one of the big lessons you're supposed to learn through that journey was about your own voice and stepping into your own power.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about this a lot. Like for me, same thing. I'm like, okay, I want power level 10. What does that look like? And just like all of these micro ways that we're like, it's power level 5 or it's power level 3 or power level 8, but still not 10. And I feel like that was a big lesson we were both supposed to learn this year in our own ways of like, what does it mean for me to really fully be at what we've called power level 10 all the time. And for me, as you know, it's like, I've been like, I think I'm the one scared of that. I don't know that anybody else is. Like, I'm the one scared of that. I don't know what it is for you, but like, I've had to kind of come to terms with like, whoa, what it looked like for me to like really go full force all in and like let that be expressed, and noticing all of these little micro ways that I had subconsciously like built in to like keep it power level 5.
Yeah.
But next year is going to be level 10.
2025 power level 10.
Power level 10.
That's the theme. That's the motto.
For both of us.
Absolutely. That's
power
the theme.
Level 10.
Power level 10. We should put that on.
Yeah.
Somebody make us mugs.
Power level 10. We'll wear shirts.
Yeah, shirts. We'll just have everything.
Look at headbands. Power level 10.
I love it.
Oh my God.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
These are great takeaways.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks for asking me the questions. It's always helpful to process, and I think that's something I encourage everybody listening to do is like look back at your year. I'm sure you talk about this on your year interview podcast. Like look back at your year, go through your photo album, go through your journal, go through your calendar, look at what you did, take account.
Going through my calendar helped me a lot, and then like this conversation helps talking about it with people, and then I'm sure after this conversation I'm gonna keep thinking, and I'm sure we're gonna talk later tonight.
Sure will.
And it's really important to really integrate all of that, you know. So I think this reflection time is super, super valuable, like to really set ourselves up vibrationally to like launch into what we're here to do, and not just accidentally recreate the same thing, different costume.
Agree.
So thank you for all of your insights and all of your shares. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So valuable, and just grateful that you're here. So thanks.
Likewise.